being recorded, so all the attendees will receive this video afterwards. Our panelists will be answering your questions as they come up. So as opposed to waiting till the end, feel free to ask away. If something pops into your mind as people are talking, we'd love to hear from you right at that point in time, and we'll try to get to it as quickly as we can within the order of questions. If you're not familiar with Zoom, you can post your questions in the Q&A in your bottom center portion of your kind of your tool ribbon on the bottom. If you have a specific question to any one of our panelists, let us know in the Q&A section that you want to ask them specifically. If not, we'll probably ask them to get all of their perspectives on your question. So feel free to ask away. And just as a reference point here, I thought this was important. As the title suggests, the crisis we're referencing is obviously the COVID-19 and the ripple effect that it's had for all of us. This is obviously the current crisis. We hope that the leadership perspective you gain here can help with challenges moving forward for any crisis, big or small. Obviously, COVID is going to go away at some point. We hope sooner rather than later, of course. But leadership challenges will remain. That's a given throughout history. So we hope you can pull a small nugget from there. Our intent today was to give you a diverse perspective, not only in leadership styles, but also a diverse cross-section of industries. So they've each had their own unique challenges as the situation's unfolded, and I think it's going to be great to hear from all of them. So with that said, it's my pleasure to introduce our panelists today. Joining us, we have Judy Baseman, Superintendent of Appleton Area School Districts. You can wave for the camera, Judy, let everybody know. We have Voss, Chief Executive Officer of AmeriLux International. And we have Sam Statz, President of Hoffman Planning, Design, and Construction. Thank you all for being here again. Are you all ready to get started? No time like the present. I don't hear any objections, so we'll go. We'll go ahead and get it going. I'm going to jump right into the first question, and it'll give you a chance to kind of introduce yourself as well. So if you can introduce yourself and tell us how your leadership style has been reaffirmed or adapted to the current situation. And we will start with, we'll put Judy on the hot seat first.
All right, good morning, everybody. Glad to be with you. I am actually finishing my third year as Superintendent of Schools in the Appleton Area School District. Really honored to serve this great community, so many great community partnerships supporting what we do for kids with our families and our community partners. In terms of my leadership style, I love to be collaborative in my approach, taking a lot of input along the way. And certainly that has served me well over my 35 plus years in education. But one of the things that this particular pandemic has, I guess, offered to me is that there are times when you just simply cannot take input, and you need to use that directive style. And so that has been adapted for me, especially in those initial weeks when the directives from the state and so on were coming fast and furiously for school districts. And so the idea that at some points you do have to just give the directive and it's a quick action. But then as we've evolved through the weeks and the months, the importance of also circling back to take some input when you have time to do that. So my team and I have started referring to this as the freedom within fences. So sometimes the fences are very close together and you have a very narrow in terms of flexibility, but then sometimes you're able to broaden the fences and there's a little bit more opportunity for school sites or departments, to work within that. So reaffirming the importance of collaboration, but also the ability to switch into that directive piece when you need to, and which happened in those initial weeks and first month probably. So.
Thank you, Judy. Kurt, same question. Should I reread it for you, or are you pretty well set?
Sure. Sure, you can reread it.
So just a chance to introduce yourself and tell us how your leadership style has been, either reaffirmed or adapted to the current situation.
Sure. Okay, thanks, Clay. Well, hi, everybody. Again, Kurt Voss. Our business is AmeriLux International, which is a value-adding distributor of all kinds of products. Largely, they end up in building and construction. We do some fabrication, assembly as part of our distribution efforts. And then in addition to that, we've got AmeriLux Transportation, which is a full-fledged carrier, and AmeriLux Logistics, which is a third-party logistics company. I guess when I think about leadership during these times, I think that it's important that as leaders, we have already defined what our leadership looks like in words on paper, and define the culture that we're looking for that goes along with that. And it's a time like this that can either affirm that those cultures and those leadership traits work or that they don't work. It's kind of like, if one of the things is you want to be honest. Okay, well, it's easy to be honest when there's nothing to lie about, or there's no news that you need to share with somebody that they don't want to hear. Same thing goes with leadership, and it goes with culture. And I think that this is a time to reinforce that your culture and your leadership even work during a time like this, as opposed to, works easy when things are going good. And so having people to a point to draw back to reinforce those culture statements and those leadership traits, I think, are important. We have a document that we call How We Succeed at AmeriLux, and it details exactly, how we want to succeed. Obviously, there's different ways to succeed, and we call those things our culture statements. You can find them on our website, but we as a group, especially as a leadership group, have found ourselves really relying on those. And I think it's reaffirmed in my mind how important that is.
Thanks, Kurt. Sam, same question. Do you want me to read it, or are you comfortable going at it?
No, I got it. I'll just introduce myself. I'm Sam Statz, president of Hoffman Planning, Design, and Construction. Been president for about 3 years, and we do a lot of work with schools and education, senior living, manufacturing, and different projects that are local, but not only local, also around the country as well, and throughout the state, obviously, as well. So we've had a little bit of a challenge in the construction industry when we had project sites, and how my leadership style has really been affirmed and adapted. What kind of struck me, Judy said something about being very decisive. I've never had a problem with that. I've always been able to make a decision when I needed to. The one thing that I wouldn't say I struggle with, but I know and I recognize my empathy has been challenged through this, because it's really been one of these issues where you've got to learn to understand what everybody is thinking, and knowing that people have different backgrounds, different health concerns, different maybe family members, whatever their situation. We had to be decisive, but I also had to be empathetic to understand what people are dealing with. And that has really been something that I wouldn't say has been affirmed, but I really had to adapt a little bit more in my leadership style, because of the fact that when you have a team, and some of those team personally and you care about within the Hoffman, but we also have subcontractors that were coming out to sites that I don't know all of their stories, and I don't know what everybody was dealing with, and I don't know in particular some certain situations. So I've really learned to try to understand what people's point of view is before we say this is hard and fast. So when it was in the beginning, I think, like Judy said, things were getting changed fast and furious. We had to make decisions, but I think what we did is adapt and tweak, and that's part of the reasons why we had so many changes in the first few weeks, because we were learning on a daily basis, if not hourly, about, okay, maybe that wasn't the best decision. We've got to adapt and be empathetic to what people need to have and their concerns. So I would say that's really how I've adapted to my leadership style to the current situation.
Very good. Thanks, Sam. So the next question we have is, tell us something that's made you most proud of your staff, organization, something that's kind of highlighted the strength internally. We'll go ahead and start Kurt out on this one, put you on the hot seat right away for this one, Kurt.
Sure. Well, a couple things come to mind. One is just the overall grit that our organization has shown during this time. The resiliency, you know, we pivoted rather quickly into some new applications for our products, and that's worked well for us. But it took a grit and a kind of failure isn't an option mentality. Also, in the context of some people working from home and some people not, there's some inherent unfairness associated with that. And, you know, we over communicated on that early on to try to kind of nip that in the bud so that there wouldn't be any jealousy or any of those sorts of things. And I have to say that I'm really proud of the group that they haven't displayed any of that. People understand those folks that, you know, have to be on site to get the job done. They understand the people that have to be on site half the time to get the job done, and maybe those that don't have to be on site at all and can be as productive. And in all cases, I haven't seen any questioning or backbiting related to that. And then those people that are not here all the time, you know, as leaders, yeah, we trust a lot and we're empathetic or try to be, like Sam said. But I'm really proud. I'm not so sure they're not getting more work done in some cases, just because, well, in some cases they can be more productive, but in other cases they want to get more done. And that's really shown through in their results. So I'm really happy about that. And lastly, I think that at a time like this, it's easy to fall victim to a victim mentality and going through a day where you're just trying to survive, which by definition translates into results that are oftentimes the minimum acceptable requirement. Maybe the boxes have been checked, but you're not really proactive because you don't have that mindset of going to make something positive happen. You're just trying to survive the day. And I'm really proud of our team that they've largely, at a time when no matter where you know, what TV station you turn on or what newspaper you read or what you read online, you know, there's a lot of victims out there and legitimate victims. And it would be easy for all of us to fall into that mentality. And I feel proud of our group that I don't think we're winning that battle. Let's put it that way.
Very good. Thanks, Kurt. Sam, same question.
All right. Something that I'm extremely proud of with our staff is we had a company meeting in the beginning of March before all of this even hit. It was just starting to come to the surface. It was right before, it was the Friday before the NCAA tournament canceled and everything just started dropping like flies after that. But our meeting in March was everybody in the company came in, and because this was kind of new, we all kind of sat around and there was a lot of hypotheticals going on. You know, what if a subcontractor ends up coming down with this? What if a school closes before the school's closed? What if an office, or what if we have to shut down a job site or a subcontractor says they're not going to come? There was all of these hypotheticals that unfortunately, majority of them ended up coming true. But our team sat in a very early stage and was able to proactively think things through as an entire company. And I can remember very vividly, you know, people were asking these questions and they'd look up to the front of the room where I was sitting and I'd look at them like, I don't know. I don't know what happens if a school closes. I have no idea. You know, so they were expecting me to have this genius answer. And I'm like, I have no idea. So we all sat and we worked. I know, exactly. So what it really was humbling and just really made me proud to just listen to my team go through these scenarios. And quite frankly, I'm extremely proud of the fact that we've really, yes, we've been impacted, but we've had measures in place to make sure that we were able to react accordingly, and I would say proactively, not just react. That's a bad word maybe to use there, but we've done a very good job of proactively managing this crisis through a difficult industry when we're spread out and there's workers that are coming to your job site and visitors that need to come to the job site. And we've had really good success throughout this. And I attribute that to that Friday in March when we sat there, and we were fortunate with the timing of it. I'll give you that. Sometimes it's better to be lucky than good, but we were fortunate with the timing of that meeting that we were able to have that. So I'm pretty proud of the way that our team was able to think that way.
Very good. Thanks, Sam. Judy, same question.
Yeah, I think the thing that I am most proud of is the fact that all of our team members were willing to step up in a relatively short time frame to make sure that we had the materials out to our students and our families that they needed. Sometimes they stepped out of a traditional role to get the work done. So for example, our facilities and operations folks were the ones that were out driving the district vans around to deliver hotspots for internet access for families that didn't have it. They were the ones to deliver the Chromebooks to families that did not have a workable device. I mean, people just stepped up. Our food service provider, they had distribution sites ready that first week following the closure. So everybody stepped up. The other piece is that flexibility. So even stepping out of our comfort zone when it comes to using technology. Our Board of Education had not been engaged in a Zoom virtual meeting as a Board of Education. They stepped up to learn how this could all unfold. And actually it's increased some participation from the public in terms of increasing accessibility. So everybody just stepped up and were flexible and did what needed to be done with the focus on the students as, you know, that primary goal.
Very good. Thanks, Judy. So this next question is kind of a build off of that. So tell us something good that, or long-lasting or impactful for your organization that's going to come out of this experience. I think obviously from a leadership standpoint, the glass can't always be half empty or half full. But from a positive standpoint, how is this going to be impactful for your organization? We'll start with Sam on this one.
Sure. So the thing that I think long-term, what we've really learned through this is we've got well, at the beginning of this, let me step back just a second. I was approached by one of the people in our office that said, hey, we're not really 100% ready with Microsoft Teams yet, but can we roll that out? And we didn't really have a choice. So it was something that was forced down our throat quicker than what we may have been exactly ready for, but it came out. And honestly, with a few tweaks here and there, we've really gotten effective with virtual meetings. So for us as a company that we've got a number of different projects that are not only, you know, maybe far remote to the state, 3-4 hour drives in the state, they're around the country. So it's really given us a chance to really test how we can stay connected remote, not only with our own team members, but honestly with some of those clients as well, where, you know, in the past, it felt like a necessity that it's got to be a face-to-face meeting for some of these meetings. So that entailed, you know, in some of these cases, you know, airline fees and travel fees. And so now we're actually going to be able to reduce our costs. I think people are more comfortable right now with doing a virtual meeting and can feel productive. So we're going to be able to reduce the cost to the clients and we can still hold effective meetings. So I think long-term, that's probably the biggest change to our company specifically, is that not only us became more comfortable, but I think society as a whole is more comfortable with virtual meetings and okay with that being a form of production at the savings expense that they can save.
Yeah, that's fair. Judy, same question.
Yeah, I would agree wholeheartedly with what Sam had shared in terms of the realization that Zoom meetings or online meetings can really be very, very effective, and that there are tools within the various platforms that you can really make use of to not just have the presentation type mode, but even some interaction and different things like that. So that has really forwarded us, not just for meetings, but also in terms of our instruction. We had a strategic plan of really incorporating virtual learning, blended learning by the fall of 2021. This has fast forwarded us to be prepared for this coming fall. Whatever the scenario ends up to be for our kids and our teachers, we will be ready at least a year and a half in advance of what we had originally predicted.
Very good. Kurt, same question.
Yeah, I certainly agree with what Sam and Judy said. You know, we certainly have found ways to be productive remotely. So not only as a way to conduct meetings, but moving forward, if there's times or circumstances where people need to work off site, those people have learned how to be productive. And so that's a nice option to have on a going forward basis. I mean, we got fortunate that our products lend themselves perfectly to sneeze guards and hygiene barriers. So it's created a new market for us that I think will be sustainable. But I think the biggest thing for us is that we've come together as a team even more because there's a common purpose, kind of a common enemy. And, we all banded together to fight that common enemy. And at the end of the day, what we're looking for is a sustainable enterprise. And that's the long-term goal. And it allowed us to continue to refocus on that and band together to an even greater degree towards that end. So that's what I would say.
Very good. So this is the flip side of this coin. So this is why we wanted to ask this question. What is something you wish you would have done differently, or something you wish you wouldn't have done at all during this situation? Hopefully something you would avoid in the future. We don't want to replicate this crisis, but there's always going to be leadership things. What did you learn from this? We'll start with Judy on this one.
Yeah, I think as I described those first few weeks and maybe the first month, we had a lot of decisions to make in a short amount of time, and we needed to be pretty directive, and some would have described it as top down. Our district is very site-based in terms of the history of decision making. So that initial piece was probably different from a lot of what people had experienced. But I think what I wish we had done differently would be to kind of break down some of those silos a little bit earlier. We functioned as a pretty tight leadership team. I have a team of 7 executive cabinet members, and we were meeting constantly in those first few weeks, and we have high trust in that particular group. But I think there was need to maybe broaden that problem-solving group a little bit earlier than we did. For example, with our technology services director, pulling him in a little bit earlier when we were having some of those discussions about how we could transition smoothly to the virtual learning. So I think we were operating maybe a little bit too long in that tighter circle, and we had the comfort, we had the trust, but then how could we have maybe a little bit earlier expanded? And now we have the structures built in for some of those more collaborative, kind of bring in that next level of leader into those problem-solving discussions. So I think just the timing of when we did that could have been different.
Okay, very good. Kurt, same question. What do you think you would have done differently or wouldn't have done at all if you had it to do over?
Yeah, well, my first thought on that question's a little premature because we're still kind of
that's fair.
Kind of learning.
We haven't survived yet, right?
Haven't had time for a postmortem at this point. But since you asked the question, I guess a couple things that come to mind. Certainly, you'd like to have a plan for everything. We didn't have a plan for a pandemic, so obviously it would be. You'd have to get advanced degree in management to have thought of that variable probably, or multiple advanced degrees. But again, you constantly, you're looking out as to what could happen. It would have been nice to have a plan, better formulated, work from home, alternative, what if another disaster happened, the place burned down. It would have been nice to have a disaster recovery plan greater than what we had. The other thing I would think is that, in the early stages of this, you're trying to give the team feedback and plans and let them know what you're thinking. And many times you want to come up with the answer even when there isn't an answer out there. And so you may focus on dates and, by this date, we're going to try to do that. And I think that what we've learned is, just keep relying on the data. You don't have to be the answer person all the time because sometimes there is no answer. And a very smart friend of mine once told me, it's really stuck with me, that for every complex problem, there's an easy solution, but it's wrong. If it were easy, if it were easy, the problem wouldn't be that complex. So as we're all searching for easy answers, there is no magic bullet. We just have to continue to communicate, continue to adapt to whatever the data tells us, and move on from there.
Very good. Thanks, Kurt. Sam, something you would have done differently or wish you wouldn't have done? If you don't have an answer for this, I can give you a pick list here to choose from.
Yeah. Well, maybe what I would have done was I wish I looked better bald. It would have helped with the hairstylist that would close down. It would have been a lot easier.
We can't all pull that off.
No, I think really what I was thinking of, like, Kurt hit on it there with we don't have all the answers. I said that earlier that I didn't, but I think the communication really is what I would focus on. That I think we did a really good job in the very front end when everything was changing hourly and daily, and our management team sent out, I personally would send out a nightly change. Here's what this current status is. When we started to get into the groove and we kind of had our policy established, I didn't send out an email to say nothing changed. And I think even just that, people were like, well, did something change? What happened in the last 24 hours? So I think in these times of this crisis, when this stuff comes up, what I learned is, over communication was always something that I knew was something that was important in any project. As a project manager, that's always important. But it's really amplified in a time when people just don't know what to believe. And I think everybody can, agree that at the beginning, there were sources of information that it didn't matter what side of the fence you were on. You could have had, a gazillion articles that backed up your position. So people were just looking to say, what are we doing now? And when we had the policies kind of set, I was like, in my head, okay, nothing's really changed. We're still going, the way we were. And people started asking, did something change? So I think if I would change anything, it was, no matter what, it's a daily update to say, even if nothing's changed, that communication really needs to be over amplified during this time when people are questioning what's going on. So that's what I would have done differently.
Very good. I'm just going to take a small break here and just remind people, anybody in the audience, if you didn't catch my opening remarks on we are answering questions real time to the extent that we can do them. So feel free to throw your questions out in the Q&A function, which is in the bottom center section of your tools ribbon. And we will get those. And if you have something, if they're directed to somebody specifically, let us know that. If they're just a general question for the group, we'll get them out and answered right away. Don't feel like you have to hold your questions till the end. All right. Number 5 is more about a personal question from a leadership standpoint. I think we're all looking for this at this point in time. What have you done personally to stay positive and energized for your mental health, for your staff? We'll start out with Kurt on this one.
Well, I think perspective is important. As we speak to ourselves, keep perspective. It goes back to something I said earlier. It applies to positivity and being energized too. It's easy to be positive when everything's great. The test as to whether or not you're truly positive is when you can overcome, something like this and remain positive, and not in a false positivity, but in a way to just maintain your perspective. So I focus on the long term. No different than a bad business cycle. I think you could equate this to, kind of a bad business cycle. As bad as things are, this virus came and it's going to go. We're going to find out a way to treat it. So as I focus on, just rather than being victimized by it, but instead focus on the opportunities that this could present, that keeps me energized, because I'm still chasing something better than what I have now as an organization. I'll say that another thing that comes to mind is, we're blessed to be in a position of leadership. People look to us to be positive and have a perspective that might be a little bit different, especially during times like this. And I think we all take that responsibility seriously and are energized by that alone.
Okay.
The other thing I would say is that, we're all overcommitted, and to the extent that we save time, someone mentioned earlier, we're not chasing from this place to this place. It's really freed up time. And I've made a conscious effort to maybe reach out to people that are important to me, that, your friends or whatever, but you don't speak as often as you'd like to. And I've really made a conscious effort to do that. And that's been very fulfilling during this time. And I've really learned from that. And I'm going to adjust my time management, I'll say, a little bit differently moving forward.
Very good. So more of a long-term perspective instead of riding the ups and downs of the COVID roller coaster. Good. Sam, why don't you jump on this next?
All right. COVID roller coaster. Huh, Clay? I'm not so sure this one's had any ups. The positives have been tougher to find.
That's my patent pending. Don't steal that.
All right, I won't. Honestly, I think a part of what I think for me, I always try to find humor in different situations to try to just keep positive about things, and that's truly that's just how I've been wired. Sometimes it's not funny, but that's all right. My dad always said you got to be funny 70% of the time. So I'll just chalk some of those up to the 30% that I'm not doing it. But I think you need to stay positive and keep a positive spin on it, even when you're not face-to-face in the meetings that you've got. So some of the things that we've done and that I've done personally with some of these Zoom meetings is you still have to take that time for that small talk and really still connect with your team members, because it's easier when people come straggling into a room. You have that small talk and you're joking around about what happened on the weekend and how the family's doing. You still have to do that in the virtual environment as well. And then the other thing personally for me, what I found is when I was working here in the office and on a regular, and then before all of this started, when I had an opportunity, I would go over to the Y over lunch hour and I would get some exercise in or something. If I didn't do that when I was working at home or something and stay in that routine, it was tough for me to still maintain my sense of, normalcy and my routine and the way. So I found that I still needed to make sure that I made time for those things that I made time for before. Even when you're in a time crunch for thing, I think Kurt just alluded, you just got to manage your time accordingly. And it was different, it was maybe working out in the basement, but I made good with it by maybe working out with my family, my kids or somebody, we just did something over lunch hour and then I go back to work. So those are the kinds of things that kept me engaged, kept me, I guess, in a positive mindset through this.
Very good. Thanks, Sam. Judy, same question. What have you done to help stay positive and energized?
I think just capitalizing a little bit on what Kurt had shared about having those trusted colleagues or friends or family members that you can talk to. For me, sometimes it was someone in a like position for me that understood some of the challenges to go through, that you have that person to go to and talk with. But I think what's been most energizing for me is now that we have established kind of a pickup time. For example, our seniors have been allowed to come in their cars to pick up their caps and gowns and their yearbooks and things like that. I went out and made sure that I was there in my car with my camera to get some video or shots of things that energize me, which is our students. And today I actually was in a Zoom band lesson with an up-and-coming clarinet player and his teacher. And I think if I had started to do that sooner, it would have really increased my energy and engagement. And so a do-over for me would be to figure out how to Zoom in with kids sooner.
Very good. So we did have a question come in from the audience that I think is a tie-in to this question. So the question comes in from Pamela. Do you listen to podcasts, meditate, yoga? How do you flush the negative out? We'll start, I guess we'll reverse it on this one. We'll start with Judy. Anything physically you do to flush the negative out?
Yeah, I think fairly early on in my new role as superintendent, I realized that I would have to be very purposeful about taking care of myself. So I'm a Headspace user, and I do that every morning. So some meditation. I also work with a trainer who helps me with workouts and yoga. And she recently planned some midday stretches for me, because when you're sitting and Zooming a lot, again, being purposeful about taking those healthy breaks. So
Very good.
not necessarily unique to the COVID season, but in any high stress position, I think it's good to take care of yourself in a purposeful way. So.
Very good, thanks. Sam, you kind of touched on this a little bit in the last part of your question. Do you have anything outside the, maybe the noon workouts with family or anything like that?
Yeah, one of the things that the part of that question that struck me was, how do you flush the negative out? And I guess the way I look at that is, I don't know if that's possible. It's you can't distract yourself from what you need to actually do, but what you can do is you can take time and pause to take that time to reflect about, how can I deal with this situation? And I guess what I would, Kurt brought up something one of his friends told him early on in his career. One of the things I heard early on is, if you haven't heard the concept of the trouble tree, and this just take a second, but essentially the trouble tree, a dad would come home and he would always walk up the front sidewalk and he'd hit the leaves on a tree that was on his front walk, and his kids didn't know what that was. And then every morning he'd walk out and he'd hit the leaves again. And one day they asked him, "Dad, what are you doing?" He said, "Well, I hang my troubles on that tree when I come home, so I don't have to worry about them. And when I come out in the morning, I go to pick them up, and normally half of them aren't there anymore." So it's a concept that's pretty simple, but it's pretty effective for me, and it's worked. I think, as Judy, was saying, if you're in a higher stress, maybe management level position, there's going to be things that come up, and you have to learn how to set things aside. And what I found is that time of setting it aside, it's not really maybe aside, but mentally it gives you a chance to just pause and come back and think about it, and come back usually a little bit more refreshed, and realize maybe it's not as bad as what you thought, and you can deal with it.
Very good. Thanks, Sam. Kurt, same question.
I'm still reflecting on Sam's tree story, but that's good. I like those simple analogies that work, right? I would say a couple of things come to mind from a practical standpoint. What I would add to what's been said already is I'm a big believer in sauna. I think it's a very healthy exercise, but if you combine sauna with a podcast or a book on tape, which is what I do, that's one of the ways you literally flush out negativity.
There you go.
As it relates to, the other thing I would add is, there's an intentionality around a mindset that says, okay, I've never arrived at a destination. I've never learned enough. I want to improve even more. And so I think it starts, as it relates to negativity specifically, with a mindset that you want to be intentional about getting better related to dealing with all the negativity around you. And then the more intentional you are about that, the easier it gets. And again, I think perspective adds to it too. If it was easy, everyone would be doing it. So, we kind of sign up for some sleepless nights, and that tree growing back buds that you got to get rid of. And
they're still there.
Yeah. So, it's kind of part of the deal. It's kind of part of the deal. So again, it's a perspective and an intentionality, I think, that is ultimately what works.
Very good. Thanks, Kurt. So we're going to take another question from the audience. This one's from Mary Thompson. How do you characterize working at home as a success or failure for employees and students? That's going to be an interesting answer from everybody. We'll start out with Judy on this one.
So the student was mentioned, and so I'll take it in that direction. So I think each individual situation is very different. So we're a diverse school district, a diverse community. So as I mentioned earlier, for some of our families, it's extremely challenging to support their students in learning at home. whether it's a work schedule or, multiple children in the family, so to say it's really difficult to answer that in a broad brush. We've done our best to shore up resources when they haven't been there in the home. And certainly we've tried to keep the connection through Google Meet between children and their teachers so that the social emotional learning aspect is attended to, because especially at the younger grades, they miss their teacher and the teachers miss them. And so I would say from a staff standpoint too, that, that not being able to be with their children. And you heard a story about a first grade teacher who went to pack up her classroom last week, and she had put students' belongings on each desk, and it's an empty room, and just melted into tears because this was a closure to the school year that she never anticipated. So is learning happening? Absolutely. Are students thriving? Absolutely. But the equity of that statement is not there. I can't say for all.
Very good. That's absolutely fair. We're going to save Sam till the end on this one. Kurt, what could you put enough of a label on it to call it a success or a failure just yet?
Well, I think we're all learning on that, but one of our culture statements comes to mind when I see that question, and that is we don't confuse activity with results. And I think it's important that we don't redefine what success looks like. Success is success. We know what it looks like. It's defined. We know what it is. And so whether you're working remotely, whether you're working with one hand tied behind your back, whatever the circumstances are, I don't think it makes sense to redefine what success is. Instead, it's working together to achieve it. And so I think as leaders, I think that's important. And certainly it's a shared responsibility. It's not us as leaders to come up with all the answers, as we've talked about earlier. So if you have somebody that's working from home, you need to help them get whatever tools they need to achieve success by the same definition that success is defined if they were working here.
Very good. That's a fair answer. Sam, same question.
I guess what I would just add, I'll combine a couple of the thoughts that we've had already. In my mind, I'm a sports guy. I'll use an analogy here. Success is definitely something that's defined, but I would go that there's varying levels. So in baseball, you can hit a single, that can be considered a success. So not everything's going to be a home run. So I think what we've learned here is you've got to get the good out of what and work towards having a positive improvement from where you were. That's a success. Now, not everything's going to be a home run. I think we've been challenged in the front end of this, although I think some of the things that have come out of this could be considered home runs and how we've managed that. So I would just say that and understanding that there's going to be varying levels of success. And as long as you continue to focus on getting at least a single or even a walk, you can consider that a success. So
very good. Thanks, everybody. We've got another question from the audience. Chris Engelbert, as leaders, how have you maintained the culture of your organizations while being remote? We'll put Sam under right away on this one.
Sure. Chris, that's a good question. Some of the things that I think that we've done, we are a family-oriented company. We've had a family culture. And so when you take the in-face meetings, that's been a challenge. So some of the things that we've done is we've set up a virtual coffee on Microsoft Teams is what we call it. And essentially, even just today, I was on there today, it was a place where people can go in, they just put useless pieces of information and factoids and pictures of when they were graduating about supporting the seniors and, family pictures from over the weekend. And it was just kind of a place where we could just kind of stay connected and still have those family stories shared. We've had also as a family culture, we've had some virtual happy hours as well, which is kind of fun for our company as well. We have some people that enjoy just getting together and socializing. So we've done that through virtual happy hours. I think everybody's kind of seen that John Krasinski's Some Good News. One of the things that I tried, again, this was probably that 70% humor, 30%. Maybe I tried doing that as well. I did a little Hoffman Good News, and I did some newscasts. It was kind of fun. I did it with my kids. They videoed it, and But it was a way to share, there was a lot of negative stuff going on, and it felt like almost that was everything you heard. So I wanted to make sure that we were getting out, some of the good stories that Hoffman had going on as well, and making sure that those weren't lost. We did different things like that to just try to, make sure that we were maintaining our culture of that family and having fun. So that's what we did.
Judy, how about you?
Yeah, I think the thing that we've continued to do, which has really helped build a culture of trust through these times, is the idea of rounding conversations. So this is a concept borrowed from the medical field, where you purposefully schedule just short conversations where your first question is always, what's something that's going well for you right now? Do you have what you need to keep doing well? Is there anything that I can do to support you? And then that last question is there somebody who's been especially helpful to you that you would like to thank? So you start out with something positive, followed up with, support, and then close with gratitude. And then that gratitude is shared back with the person who was identified. And so that has been a practice that we've used prior to COVID and have really been intentional about keeping that going throughout this time period. Even though you're boxed in with all of the essential immediate needs, to build in time for that has really helped us with the culture piece of gratitude. Culture gratitude.
Judy, can you throw that? Those are called rounding conversations?
Yes.
Okay. Did that come from anywhere specific? Can someone do more research on those?
Well, actually, yes, I can. It's a Studer, S-T-U-D-E-R, education. And they've been coaching here in our district for the last 2 years or so. And it's one of their leadership strategies. And it comes from the medical idea of doctors do their rounding. So they were originally working with health organizations, and then they transitioned to education about 6 years ago. So.
Very good. Thanks, Judy. Same question back to you. How have you maintained the cultures while everybody's remote?
Yeah, it's hard going third. I would add that embedded in that question, I think, is that you've defined what your culture is. So
Sure.
All too often, culture can be defined as, overall good feeling or something more abstract than that. And I think I definitely add, I'm a big believer in defining what that is and then measuring it. And at a time like this, we've done that, and continue. It's an ongoing process, obviously. But to throw out the challenge then of, okay, teammates, this is a real test. We had a great culture, and then all of a sudden, the light switch got hit. Can we maintain it? And it becomes a collective challenge that has been really fun to watch and navigate. And it's not easy, but again, it starts with the definition of what a good culture is, beyond the abstract general ideas of what we all generally like, and then measuring yourself against those things in a time like this. So
very good. That makes
me,
sense.
that's how you do it during a time like this.
So as we, as I think Kurt alluded to earlier, this isn't over yet, so it's a little tough to plant your flag always on some of your decisions. That being said, we know we have a getting back to work solution at some point, or getting back in school solution at some point. We don't always know when that is. When you hear from staff or leadership, what are some of the perspectives and fears you're hearing as this conversation kind of turns back towards getting back to work, coming back to school, getting back in the office, and how are you addressing them? We'll start with, this is a long part question. We'll put Kurt back under the gun on this one.
Well, you didn't want to go third last time, so.
That's true.
You got your wish.
It's about time these guys don't take all my ideas. So, well, on the back to work issue, it's difficult because everybody is at a different place on what I'll call the anxiety scale. Some people have little or no anxiety over this virus, and some people have a lot of anxiety over the virus. In addition to that, everyone's personal circumstances are different relative to childcare, maybe they have a grandparent that they're taking care of that are at a higher risk. So it's a tough one to make rules. So I think first and foremost, I think flexibility is crucial. And in the final analysis, flexibility doesn't really cost anybody anything. It's just the right thing to do. So I would start with that. But what we did is we empowered a group from different departments. And I was very intentional about making sure that the people that were represented fit into many of those categories. And so that they could interact and come up with a strategy that worked for everybody. It's going to deal with, who works off site and who doesn't, and how do we vet that out? It deals with, for those of us that are working in the office, what sort of safety measures are we taking to make sure that everyone's comfortable? Because the last thing we want is someone to come into a place of work and not feel comfortable. So we wanted to have everyone's voices heard, and at the end of the day, we do have a business to run, both short-term and long-term. So keeping that in mind as well, and having us all work together on this collective challenge. And they're doing the work as we speak. In fact, we're going to have a presentation today at our staff meeting to go over the recommendations that group is making. So again, I think it's not us being the answer people. It's empowering others to be part of the solution. It's not enough to just complain about what's wrong. We all know what's wrong, but empower them to be part of the solution. And I think, again, it gets people into that forward-looking, I can make an impact mentality that works. Did that answer your multi-part question, or were there more parts to it?
Yeah, I'm going to give Judy a question that's easier now since you answered the hard one already.
Great.
No, Judy, kind of the same question. I know obviously a different industry with a whole different set of ramifications and ideas for going back to work. But what are some of the prospective fears you're hearing, and how are you addressing those? I think Kurt's, the anxiety spectrum is a really good metaphor for it. How are you addressing everybody on the anxiety spectrum?
Yeah, that's a really tough part of the planning moving forward. Is that we know we have people all over the place in terms of their comfort level with even thinking about sending their children back to school. Certainly staff members, as Kurt described, they might be caring for family members who are in a vulnerable category, and so their fears at coming back to work and potentially exposing their loved one that they're caring for, all of those things figure in. So one of the things that we did early on was to really take a look at our HR policies and handbook language and put some things in place that were really defined, some of the medical, the emergency leave and how that could be used, and making sure that information was out there for our staff so they knew what their opportunities and options were should they be faced with the need to stay at home for longer periods of time, that there was a way to manage that. Relative to school reopening, which is already on people's minds, I was hoping we could close out the school year before the questions would start coming, but that was naive on my part. So anyway, we are planning for multiple scenarios. So that idea of that scenario-based planning. So we know we need to be ready for some kind of blended learning where maybe we won't be able to have all of our kids back face-to-face. We know we need to be ready for a blended kind of a model where maybe some kids are back certain days, and then, because we might need to get those class sizes down, which is, some of the things that we're looking at, but then also to be ready for fully face-to-face. And so scenario-based planning is something that we are working on. And similar to Kurt, we have a representative team in place to look at the multiple different areas in our organization to see, okay, what are best practices. For example, here at our leadership center, where we have the public interacting with our staff, what are the best practices for in our school buildings where we know that we want to continue that 6-foot distancing? And so we brought our nurses on board. We have a beautiful a department of nurses who are just way ahead of the game. So we're involving teachers, administrators, our expert nurses, representative group, and we're calling it our School Safety Reentry Task Force. So that's up and running. They'll meet throughout the month of June, and we'll keep our our parents and our staff informed as we go.
Very good. Yeah, whole different set of circumstances, of course, than everybody else is facing. But Sam, same question. How are you dealing with the different perspectives and fears as at least the conversations turn towards coming back to work?
Sure, and I won't reiterate some of the things Kurt did. You know, now I'm going through it. Kurt said a lot of great things. I think what I'll just add to it is, as far as what we're basing our decisions on, it's not a timeline based. Kurt mentioned that even earlier, that people were looking for, when is this date going to happen? And people, so we're basing things on events. Probably that scenario based planning. I think, Judy, it's maybe a different way of terming it, but it's more of an event based. And if you just think about it in reverse, they went from 250 people to 50 people to 10 people. That's going to start reversing. You know, when we can get to 10 people to 50 people to 250 people, we're kind of tying it to these events. And what we've been doing is it's going to be phased based on those CDC guidelines. And then for us, it's the AGC, the Association of General Contractors, and how it impacts our job sites. We're taking their lead. You know, that's not our expertise, and they've got people that are working around the clock on what are the right things to do. So we're going to take their lead and go with that and put those into place. And I see that continuing for the foreseeable future until, you know, it's gone, which I don't know if it would ever be gone, but until the foreseeable future, we're going to just continuing doing what we need to do based off of what the experts recommend.
Very good. So I want to be respectful of everybody's time. We're pushing up on noon. We've got about 3 minutes left. So real quick, I wanted to go around to the panelists. If you had any thoughts, recommendations for leaders that are listening, and your opportunity to kind of segue yourself out of the webinar. I'll start with Judy.
All right. Well, I mentioned the word trust earlier in the conversation, and I see this as another opportunity. Maybe some people refer to it as a critical incident to really fast forward on the culture of trust in your organization. And so people really watch leadership at times like this. And so we as a team have really seen this as a way to focus on the vision of the organization, which is the importance of working together, collaborating together to support our students and their families. And we value those partnerships throughout the organization. And I just want to express thanks to families who have partnered with us in a whole new way to help learning continue for the kids. So great partnerships to be grateful for.
Very good. Thank you, Judy. Kurt, same question for you.
Well, I guess I would say that, you know, after every downturn or recession, there have been organizations, companies that have pulled away from the pack. And I think that this circumstance is going to be the exact same thing. Those that will pull away from the pack will be the ones that looked at this as an opportunity, didn't go through these times as being a victim. Sam, I disagree with one thing you said, that this won't end. This will end. There's going to be therapeutic drugs. There's going to be a vaccine. The only question is whether or not we as the public display again our short memories or long memories. But at the end of the day, we have a finite memory, and this is going to be in the rearview mirror. And so that's a perspective that I try to keep in mind at all times, still at the same time being sensitive to today. I don't mean to minimize or be falsely optimistic or anything like that, but those are the facts. I mean, we're going to wake up a year from now and it's going to be in the rearview mirror. And, you know, to the extent that we're able, my focus is on expanding our value proposition to the marketplace, not watering it down because of a short-term blip or, well, we don't know how short-term it's going to be yet, but frankly, that's my focus. So I would just encourage everyone to look at this as an opportunity and be one of the people that, you know, pull ahead, pull away from the competition when you look back a year from now.
That's great advice, Kurt. Sam, because of time, I'm going to put you under the tightest time constraints. You got about 25 seconds to push something out just magical here.
All right, well, then I'll lean on a cliche. I think what I've learned is to seek first to understand. That's really what I think I would pull away as far as what we need to do. There's a lot of things I mentioned, the empathy at the beginning that I've worked I think, Kurt, to your point, I do agree that there is going to be a finite end to this. And I think to that point, it's about learning from the past and making yourself better as a result of that. So it's not forgetting about the past, it's learning from it and being better. I agree with you 100% on that. The only other thing I would add is, as these changes are coming through, what I'm focusing on right now as a leader is not letting these changes sacrifice culture. So the things that have been better and things that we can do, great, let's get better, but it's got to improve culture. If anything, if it's going to change it, it's got to change it for the better. So that's what I'm focusing on, that balance of how do you maintain that and how do you improve it even more so. That's it. I'm out of time.
You went way over. No, we are right at time. I wanted to thank, obviously, Judy from Appleton Area School District, Kurt from AmeriLux, and Sam from Hoffman for taking some time today out of their busy schedules to talk with us. And I wanted to thank all of our attendees. You're all busy, so and we appreciate you. We appreciate you coming and listening and learning. So thank you, everyone.
Thanks for the opportunity.
Everybody.